Hello, Gen Genies. Before we get started, Rich and I want to let you in on some exciting updates for our Patreon subscribers.
Patreon is a site where listeners can pledge a small monthly amount, either $5 or $10, to support the cost of bringing you your favorite podcast.
Okay, all patrons get early access to new CutOff Jeans episodes before they're released to the public.
And along with our undying gratitude, you'll also be able to join our special patron-only Facebook group.
But the most exciting new perk is exclusive access to the essays that I'm writing for my upcoming memoir. It's a sneak peek.
New Patreon supporters will also get a shout-out on the podcast.
You know, Rich and I enjoy bringing you the CutOff Jeans podcast, and it would mean so much if you would consider supporting our labor of love.
Just go to patreon.com/CutOff Jeans podcast.
Thank you so much, my Gen Genies.
And now, on with the show.
Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip hip hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Jeans.
Welcome to CutOff Jeans, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Dixon-Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the producer and co-host of this podcast. Hey, Julie, welcome to episode 409. Shine on, 409. Do you remember that commercial?
Was that a commercial I missed in the 70s when I was in Australia?
Oh, maybe. I think it was to the tune of Shine On Harvest Moon.
Sounds like it.
But it was Shine On 409, as in 409, the cleaner, the kitchen cleaner. I was listening to a 70s station and they were playing We Are Family. And all I could think of was, we are Pepsi free. Do you remember that from the 80s when Sister Sledge sold out?
That was Sister Sledge?
Yeah. Weren't they a one-hit wonder?
Wait, didn't they do Fire as well?
Oh, maybe. You know what?
Romeo and Juliet.
You know, I guess it's better than being me and being a no-hit wonder.
There you go.
How are you doing, Julie?
I'm doing well. Or how are you? Are you working a lot?
I'm working. I'm back at work. And I took my first little vacation. I went to Cambria for several days, and it was beautiful, and watched the sunset over the ocean. And then we went to Paso Robles and did some wine tasting. And
oh, how lovely.
It was really, really nice, and did some hiking. It was with the dog. It was beautiful, and it was nice to get away.
You went wine tasting a couple weeks ago, if I recall.
Yeah, it was like one night overnight. We went to Temecula. It feels like all my vacations are wine tasting, you know, because I can't taste wine at home. It's more fun to taste wine when you're out of the house, and it's just kind of pathetic at home.
I hear you. I really miss traveling. I've done, some little side trips and stuff, but I'm really ready to travel internationally. Mm-hmm. I'm ready to go back to Australia. I don't know when that's going to happen. It's shut down there.
Oh, is it still shut down there?
Oh, it's shut. The borders are closed. You can't get flights out of LA until like next year right now.
From what I understand, just going overseas at all right now is sort of a crapshoot, and that you'd never know because you could get stuck over there,
right.
or you may not be able to do the things you want to do or you expect to do because it's an always changing situation.
Yeah. Listeners, you may have noticed we have a new Patreon bumper.
Yes.
At the beginning. Now that we've had Patreon for a year or so, we've figured out what works and what doesn't, and how much time is required to be able to fulfill certain things. So I wanted to add to, well, first of all, I want to give a new patron shout out to Travis Brown, who is our newest Patreon that just joined yesterday.
Thank you, Travis.
Thanks, Travis. Appreciate it. And also, I want to add a perk, a temporary perk. The next $10 patrons that join Patreon will, along with their regular swag, will also receive a handmade item directly from my stash made by my hot little hands.
Wow. I'm tempted to sign up for it myself just so I can get the swag, Julie.
I haven't swagged you in a while.
I have not been swagged in so long. Wait, what are we talking about? Yeah, let's get the next 10 people and we'll have some swag for them.
Come on in, you guys. I've also, as far as like my TikTok, all right. I started the TikTok page and I've still not, every time I go on there to think that I'm going to record something and post it, I get sucked into TikTok itself.
Oh.
And I go into such a TikTok rabbit hole. And I'm so overwhelmed by how clever people are with their TikToks.
Yeah.
That I go, I can't possibly do this. And so then
no.
But I'm going to. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to start, I think, giving tips and stuff like that. Like just kind of talking to the camera, tips about, finding family tips.
I think that's a great idea. Because the TikTok ones are real short, right?
Not as short. They're as long as you want them to be up to 3 minutes, I think.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to look it up. But even as you're saying TikTok, and I know what TikTok is, people don't have to tell me. I'm old, I know. But wasn't there a character in some movie called TikTok? And I want to say it might have even been like Return to Oz.
Yes. it was a clock.
Yes.
It was like an alarm clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, my Lord.
I can't believe of all the times I've heard about TikTok and talked about TikTok, I've never made that connection. You bring out these pop culture references in me and Julie.
I really do. I think we stimulate each other's pop culture prowess.
I've been swagged and TikTok and pop cultured today.
Yeah, get out of this one. How's this going to happen?
So what's going on in DNA, Julie?
I like to discover adoptee/NPE stories in TV shows. There's this new TV show called What If? Do you know what that is?
No.
It's like, remember the movie Sliding Doors?
Yes.
With Gwyneth Paltrow, where it shows like if she'd taken 2 separate paths in life.
Yes.
And so this is like that, only it's 3 separate paths in this guy's life. And one of the paths, it was revealed in this week's episode, was that he goes to a reunion and his girlfriend from when they were dating back then confesses that she had gotten pregnant by him and didn't tell him and gave a baby up for adoption. Wow. So I'm curious to see how and already I know he wants to find the kid. But I'm curious as to how they go about it and how they write that.
Well, now you're going to have to follow it and follow up on it.
I know. That means I have to watch the thing. It's actually pretty interesting. And the guy is very attractive that stars in it.
Well, and then it's not, it's no hardship to watch it then.
Yes, it's not for naught. Did you happen to catch the Paul Franzak story on CNN?
I did not.
Sunday night? It was so good. So Paul Franzak has been on the show before.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Yes, he was the one who was kidnapped as a baby from the hospital, and then had an epic journey after he found out about it. And long story short, he was returned to the family, but he actually was not their child. So went about trying to find who he was and also where the real Paul Franzak went. Right. So it was really, I know the story, but I was riveted. It was so well done. Paul, as I knew, is great on camera. He's a very attractive gentleman. I'm talking a lot about how guys look on camera today, aren't I?
You're so sexist, Julie. If I said that about a woman.
Yeah. How does it feel, boys? Anyway, it was really beautifully done, and they're probably going to keep playing it again. It's called The Lost Sons. And what was interesting, there are a couple things that were interesting. When Paul and I talked about it originally, he had said that his mother had agreed that it was him, even though she'd only last seen him when he was a day old. But she felt that if she didn't decisively say that was her child, that she would be somehow, you know what I mean? She was expected to say, well, yes, that's my child.
Yes, regardless. I remember that. Yes. Yeah.
And there was another woman who I guess was there at the time, or I'm not sure where she got this information, but her recollection was that she looked at the baby, was that when the mother looked at the baby, she said, oh my God, that's my baby. And I thought that was interesting that they have different recollections of what her reaction was.
Right.
When she first saw him. Since we spoke to Paul, the real Paul Franzak was discovered. One of his daughters took a DNA test. He and his biological mother had a few conversations, I think a couple conversations on the phone. He wasn't ready to connect. He was also going through cancer at the time and has since passed away. So the mother and the real Paul never actually got to meet, which is very sad.
That is sad.
But he was a very private person, and I think it was probably such a lot to take in because his mother, who had raised him, had passed away. There was no way of knowing how he had come into the family.
So he didn't know, like, did she kidnap him or did she?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and we'll probably never know how she was a single mother though. But we don't know how she got him, and we'll probably never know. So his 3 daughters did appear on the show, but they didn't show their faces because they wanted to keep their father, because their father valued his privacy so much that they wanted to.
So tell me again where I can see this or where I can look for this, because I want to watch
CNN.
this on CNN.
Yes, CNN. They tend to play things over like several times over on CNN.
It's probably on demand, or I bet if you went to CNN.com, you could probably search for the Lost Sons, right?
The Lost Sons, the Paul Franzak story. Really beautifully done. Oh, here's some more news. This is just genealogical news, not DNA news. After 83 years of filming the world's historical genealogical records, Family Search has completed digitizing its 2.4 million rolls of microfilm.
Wow.
The best part? The archive, which contains information on more than 11.5 billion individuals, is now available for free on FamilySearch.org. So there's an asterisk next to that I will explain in a minute. So if you want, it says, and I'm reading the press release basically, if you want to check out these digitized microfilms for yourself, explore Family Search's free collections of indexed records and images by going to FamilySearch.org and then search both records and images. The images feature will let you browse digitized copies from the microfilm collection and more. You will need a Family Search account to access digitized records. But don't worry, signing up is completely free, which is true. It is free. It's a bit misleading because the last time in my experience on Family Search, most of the records are not, if you can be logged into Family Search, but you can't actually access the visual of the records unless you are in a Family Search facility. Family History Libraries, which is owned by the Mormon Church, and most of them are in Mormon churches or Mormon temples, or a local historical society. For example, the Burbank Genealogical or Historical Society. I used to, when I wanted to access Family Search records, I had to go there and be logged into their Wi-Fi.
But is this changing that? I mean, can you now look from your own home?
Well, I just tried accessing some records that I already have in my tree, and it wouldn't let me.
Huh.
So I'm not sure. And then, in fact, at the end of the article, there were some comments, and somebody wrote, I still can't see everything. And so the author wrote back, all of the microfilms are digitized and published on Family Search. However, that does not mean they are all available for viewing. While the majority are broadly accessible, some will have varying degrees of access limitations governed by contractual agreements or other restraints. Where access limitations exist, most will be available through the Family Search Family History Library, meaning you have to go there and log into their Wi-Fi.
What good is that? Not everybody can go to a research library nowadays.
Well, I will. Yes, it would be much much handier if you could go, if you could do it in your living room. Certainly. It's misleading. And here's the thing. Most towns have a family genealogical society or a family history library. Most towns have a Mormon church. For me, here's the thing. For me, I usually go to the Burbank Genealogical Society. It was really hard to concentrate in there because for a library, it's loud. It's the volunteers that work there yell back and forth to each other in the library, and it's very distracting to me. And I want to shush them, but they work there, so I can't. So what I ended up doing was I could take my laptop, and if I could park right outside the library, I could still access the Wi-Fi.
That's weird. So you don't have to like log onto their system, like onto their own mainframe in order to see this information. You just have to be on their Wi-Fi?
Yeah, on the family history library's Wi-Fi.
And yet what they're saying in this press release makes it sound like, oh, you sign up for this free account and then you have access to this information. But then,
it's misleading. Now, guys, if I'm wrong about this, if anybody has any different information, please let me know. I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are listeners that know more about family history, family search, and what have you. But this is just from my experience.
That sounds good. The jury is still out. We'll find out.
The jury is out.
We'll find out more. And I think we should take a break.
I think so, too.
If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review. Or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Genes Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
Okay, it is time once again to revisit Ancestry's ThruLines. I do this periodically because there's always a lot of confusion about it. And last week, Layla Pearl Larkin of the DNA Geek, who is the Gen Genie with the most scientific background that I know, that I will go to for really, really scientific questions, basically.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and she wrote a little, on Facebook, she wrote a little update about ThruLines, a very succinct description of what it means. And she's also going to write a blog post about it that she hasn't done yet, but she gave me permission to reference this
nice.
This week on our podcast for everybody. The first thing I want to say, and she didn't say, but it drives me crazy, is that it is ThruLines, not TruLines. So many people call it TruLines, and I'm like, there is an H in there. And TruLines is incredibly misleading because it is in no way true without researching.
Aha.
Okay. So there's a lot of confusion about how it works and how to interpret it, or them, the ThruLines meaning. They show how you might be connected to your DNA matches, and they require two things: shared DNA and enough of a tree for you and your matches for Ancestry's system to cobble lineages together back to potential common ancestors. Okay?
All right.
So it's twofold. They have to be a DNA match, and you both have to have a tree.
Okay.
Okay. So when you enter the portal, the ThruLines portal, you can, and also you have to have your DNA connected to your tree. That's another thing. When you enter the portal, you'll see an array of the direct ancestors in your tree. These are not the ThruLines. These are just people that you've already put into your tree. Hover over each panel to see how many ThruLine matches you have for that ancestor. So you hover over it, and it'll say how many, it can be anywhere from 0 to 150 or however many. But just people who have trees that are DNA matches that may be connected through this ancestor.
Okay.
Okay. For instance, my third great grandfather, Thomas Chadwick, 1789 to 1868. I have 19 ThruLines for him, ranging from 9 to 1,500 centimorgans. My brother. Are they all correct? I don't know. A tertiary review looks accurate. A little more research could confirm or negate the accuracy of the through lines. So meaning it'll show me how they think that we're connected. But if it is now my job to look at their tree and look at the records and make sure that, yes, those are siblings up there and they are a descendant of that sibling. And I am a descendant of another sibling, and that all checks out.
Yeah, you're checking your work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or their work.
Or their
really.
work, I guess. Yeah.
So, yeah, but remember that many people copy other people's trees without fully researching the match. So even if they have that in their tree and that is a correct match, their tree may be wrong. That's another thing that you have to consider. Also, what happens if you say I replace my grandfather, Noel Price, with Orville Bjorgi? So now it will say Orville Bjorgi is my grandfather, which he is not. But all of a sudden, if there are DNA matches that happen to be related in some way to Orville Bjorgi, I'm going to get through lines for them, even though I'm not related to them. I mean, it would be coincidental.
Right.
If I have any DNA shared with any of the Bjorgis of Montana, but that the names that you have in your tree absolutely reflect through lines, and it'll throw off the AI if you have different names.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so when evaluating, consider these questions: do other descendants exist who could give you through lines? Meaning, if you're an only child, you're not going to get through lines for your mother. Mm-hmm. You will get it for your grandmother and your great-grandmother. Anyway, I think that makes sense to you.
Right.
If there are other descendants, have they tested? If there are other descendants who have tested, do they have trees that Ancestry's AI can grab onto? If not, you won't get through lines. Okay?
Okay.
If all the criteria above are met and you still have no through lines for that ancestor, consider that your tree may not be correct.
Yes.
So there you go. That is, I think it's really, I think it's very succinct, at least the way that, and I am quoting Leah a lot here. Thanks, Leah. But guys, I always recommend people going to the DNA Geek, which is Leah's business page or Leia's web page, because she's always writing blog posts. And if you're serious about learning to be a genetic genealogist, she is an excellent resource because she knows her stuff, especially when it comes to the science behind it.
Well, I have a question because you started this off by saying that you have to make sure that your tree is connected to your DNA. So how do you make sure that your tree is connected to your DNA on Ancestry?
So you go into settings, and which is on the upper right-hand side of your main DNA page. It looks like a cog or a gear.
Yes.
On the next page, you can change all of your settings for it. And it says connect DNA to a tree.
I see.
And then if you click on it, it'll give you a list of the trees that you have. In my case, I have about 200. But you'll find that tree and then it'll guess who you are. Usually you're the home person. And so it knows exactly where you are in that tree. And that's how ThruLines works, because all of a sudden the Ancestry AI can evaluate that.
I see. And it doesn't change your tree. In other words, it'll just show you. It doesn't take people off of your tree.
It doesn't change your trees, but it'll say you'll get a little. Hold on, let me look. If you have a ThruLines, you'll get a leaf hint and that'll say common ancestor on that DNA match.
I see.
So
I have a lot of shaky leaf hints.
That's on your tree. That's not your DNA.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. You may have noticed that the trees don't shake and the leaves don't shake anymore. They
Did
changed.
they ever?
They used to shake. They don't shake anymore.
Oh, okay.
They were trying to get your attention. I think people got sick of it. Okay, so thank you, Leah, for letting me reference that and maybe clarify for some of the listeners once again, because it is confusing. And it's ThruLines, not TruLines.
And we'll be back after this short break.
Thank you for listening to Cut Off Genes with Julie Dixon Jackson and Richard Castle. You can support us by going to patreon.com/Cutoff Genes podcast. Now, back to the program.
Okay, guys, it is story time, and I'm really excited about this one. This is author Megan Culhane Galbraith. She is the author of The Guild of the Infant Savior, an adopted child's memory book. I've spoken about this before, and it was so great to talk to her. She's so fun and insightful and creative. Was kind of inspiring to me. Fair warning, the first couple minutes of this interview, I sound weird because I wasn't turned up enough. So, but it won't be like that the whole time.
So just
giving you a warning.
Bear with us for 2 minutes.
Bear with the beginning. It's not me. Megan sounds great the whole time.
Let's have a listen.
Hi, guys. I have on the line Megan Culhane Galbraith, who is the author of The Guild of the Infant Savior, an adopted child's memory book that I'm so excited about. And thank you so much for talking to me today, Megan.
Well, thanks, Jules. I appreciate you asking me on.
I devoured this book in record time, especially for me because books make me go to sleep. Before we talk about the book, I would love so much to hear your story.
Yeah, happy to. I'd always known that I was adopted. I had an adopted child's memory book. That was the name of my baby book. Okay. And, when I would look through it with my parents, you as a child, you don't absorb things like, I don't know what adopted means. I didn't know to parse, like I brought home from somewhere instead of, I didn't even think to myself like, gosh, I'm not even a newborn in these photos. I'm a fully formed toddler on my mom's knee, but,
did you think
as
that
I got older,
until you got to school, did you think that everybody was an adopted baby?
No, I really didn't have many thoughts about it.
Okay.
To be honest, I felt in many ways like when people would say, oh, you look just like your mom or you look just like your dad, I'd be like, no, I don't. I don't. I mean, I'm white. I have brown hair. My parents are white with brown hair.
Yes.
They did a damn good job.
Basically the
matching.
only similarity. Oh, did they? Well, that's
right.
Good. That's half the battle right there.
Yeah, I think they did a great job matching, from what I found out. But in any case, like like many adoptees, it took me, I never made a secret of like being curious about my adoption. But it wasn't until I became pregnant myself that I thought, geez, I loved my sons, I loved being pregnant. And I was like, who would surrender their baby? This has got to be the hardest thing somebody has to do,
Yeah. I had that same experience. The connection, the physical connection and the desperation to be touching her at all times and vice versa was so overwhelming for me. And I don't know if that's an exaggerated response because I was adopted. But it was so strong and so visceral for me.
I felt the same way.
Yeah.
I didn't know, after I wrote this, like I wrote a specific essay about, giving birth to my first son and just having this overwhelming feeling like, do not take my baby out of my sight. Like, do not, I had a C-section, and I was just like tracking him across the room, like, do not take him out of this room. And now that I'm in adoptee communities, I realize that is a response that's a trauma response. I wanted to have him in my room with me, and they were like, no, he'll be in the nursery. And I was like saying to my ex-husband, like, don't let them change the, the bracelets on him. I don't want my baby switched at birth. You have all these like things going through your head.
Right.
And
it's probably an irrational fear that is rational considering our experience. Yeah,
exactly. Yep, exactly. So after that, I was adopted through Catholic Charities and got it's that 2-stage process, you're non-identifying information, which, I sat on that for a while and thought about it a lot. And it turned out, my birth mother had updated my information with some, news of her mother having been given DES. So I was a DES granddaughter, essentially. And that's a drug that you probably know they gave to women probably in the 50s or 40s to stop their
morning
breast milk
sickness.
from
Oh,
coming
their
in.
breast milk. Okay.
Yeah, and for morning sickness too, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
And so anyway, because she had updated the information, I thought, well, maybe she's interested in being found. And it took 2 phone calls. The caseworker was laughing. She's like, this is the easiest search we've done, because, they called her at where she worked and at last place of work, and they were like, oh yeah, she always said she had a daughter out there somewhere.
Oh, she's an open book. Okay.
Yeah. So we met. I was 29 when we met. I just had my first son, and met in New York City and started a relationship. It was, and in typical form, I just thought. I remember going down on the train on Amtrak, being just having like explosive diarrhia. I was so scared. I was just like, that's not a fun thing on Amtrak.
Right.
And I 10 out of 10 don't recommend that. And and then I remember we had this amazing weekend, and it was sort of like, she was like more like a bossy big sister than a mom. She didn't have any other children, and but and so she walked me around. Like, the whole idea was to be near the Guild of the Infant Savior, which was the unwed mother's home where she was sent to have me in New York. And so we walked around town. She showed me kind of the neighborhood, which was fascinating because I'm a big person about place, you know. And
yes, me too.
One of the things that's still so weird, like I remember in high school skipping school to go into New York City because we just lived nearby in Connecticut. And there was a time that I remember running around the city with my high school friends. We were in the Carnegie Hall area. I played the violin, and I was like, how do we get to Carnegie Hall? You know, and of course, some guy was like, practice.
That's my instant reaction as well.
Exactly. But I remember being on a street corner and having this visceral feeling like I have been here before.
Really?
Yes, like I have been here before. I know this place, but I had never been there physically. And now that I realized, like, the Guild of the Infant Savior is right in that area. It is like 2, 3, 4 blocks from that area. It's up in the mid, 50s. Midtown East. Yeah, 50s. Yeah. And so as I put that together, I was like, oh my God. And
I'm having like memories in my head of, there were places that I felt connected to when I was a kid and I couldn't explain why. And there was one in particular that was a place where my mother literally grew up.
Wow.
Yeah. So
were you adopted into a home that was nearby where you found out your birth mother lived?
It was about 50 miles, but it was a place that was a well-known area that people would go to, like, for sightseeing. Wow. It was kind of a country town, and it was kind of this mythical place too. There was a movie made about it in the 70s, and that was kind of mysterious. Wow. And I loved that whole mysterious, otherworldly feeling of it. And it wasn't until, when I found my mother, I was like, oh my God, she lived right there.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like, really, I think what's helped me very recently too is very much like tuning into my intuition and paying much more attention to it, because when you have those like vibrational things happen, you're just like, I need to pay attention to this. I
couldn't agree more.
I can't.
I think we're all a little bit psychic in some way, but I think most of us just don't know how to use it. I mean, I know I don't.
Exactly.
I feel like I'm more psychic than a lot of people that I know, just because of the amount of coincidences in my life. But I think we all have that capability, but we don't listen to it, possibly.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think especially like, as my birth mother began telling me her stories, telling me about, the circumstances of my adoption and all that stuff, I began to kind of, I just took them in for a long time. I didn't go to school yet for grad school for writing. I hadn't really thought about writing them down, but I was writing them down, and I was tape recording her, and I was like, who's this? Who's that? Tell me all about this. I still have not done any sort of DNA test, which
that's insane to me.
I just, it's weird. I'm going to do it. I am. This is going to be my Christmas gift to myself, but I feel like it's going to have some more surprise, some other surprise that I'll be like.
In my notes, I have, who is your father? Have you taken a DNA test?
Well, here's a weird story for you.
Okay.
So when I got to grad school and I started writing and publishing some essays, one of the essays, and it's in the book, but one of the essays, early essays I published was essentially about basically Googling for my father, given the parameters and the details that my birth mother told me about him, I just started kind of Google stalking who I might thought was my dad.
As we all do, yeah.
Right. And so I just wrote about that process. And at the end, I found that the closest person that matched was somebody who had just died 2 years before. And I was like, oh, womp, womp.
Yeah.
Well, coincidentally, I don't know how, but I get a message over the transom, probably on Facebook, from this woman. She's like, hey, I read your essay about looking for your birth dad. I think you're my cousin. I think he's my uncle. Out of the blue. So I wrote back to her and I was like, are you reading random literary journals? How did you find this? And because she was doing some genealogy research using his name, either it popped up as an article on Ancestry or it popped up in a Google search.
Yeah.
And so this is years ago now. And so her dad was still alive, who was his brother. And we talked a little, we traded photos, and she said, I showed your photo to my dad, and he's like, oh yeah, that's a Stanford. She's a Stanford. And we're still in touch now. And I really, at this point, I'm like, I'm ready to meet you. I'm ready to
you know what we need to, here's what you're going to do. Ancestry DNA tests are $59 right now.
Okay.
Get yourself a damn DNA test and I will find your father for you. I will solve it once and for all.
Really?
Because that's what I do. So
okay.
we need to get to the bottom of this. It needs to be done.
Because in, my birth mother said to me, it was this guy or it was the 60s. It could have been anybody, which I'm like, okay,
well, at least she was honest about that.
Right.
Yeah. I don't believe anything until DNA proves it, basically, because, people misremember things and it's
absolutely.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
We'll talk later, but I want you to do that.
Okay. I have homework. I appreciate it.
Yes, you have homework. That was the first question that when I realized that it wasn't really answered in the book, that you don't have your answers for sure about your paternal side, and I want to help you with that.
Okay. Thank you. Right.
Before we get into the book, was there anything else that you wanted to relay to us about how you got there to write the book, or anything significant that is not necessarily in the book that you think that you'd like to share?
I mean, my getting to writing the book was, going to, I think, grad school for my MFA was pivotal. It was critical, transformational in the idea that I could put these things on paper and work through them and make art from them.
Yeah.
And, and while I was in grad school, I started the Dollhouse project, which is now part of the book, which is now part of a larger visual art project, visual art aesthetic that I do. So let's say the essay about the Domicon babies, for instance, the one that uses, right?
I talked about.
So that actually began as a gallery show.
Okay.
I was juried into a show by the curator at Mass MoCA, but to a local, to a gallery down here in Troy. And I remember writing the artist statement and people sort of standing around that installation going, this can't be real. This isn't real.
It's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah. And so I realized, like, I need to write about this. And being able to, like, see myself through the lens of those babies, and it just opened up a whole new. That essay, the way I structured it and did it, actually opened up the structure for the rest of the book, because all of a sudden I just had this light bulb moment very later on in the book of, oh my God, why don't I stage my baby photos in the dollhouse the same way I did with the Domicon babies? This would work. And suddenly it fell together. It was like I probably took 2 days and took those photos. It maybe took a week to take those photos and to think about where to place them and put them and, like, curating them out. And I also started, I started initially drawing the little pieces from my baby book, like some of the illustrated pieces you see in the collage at the front of the book.
Right.
Are directly from my baby book. And as I started drawing, I noticed, as you start noticing, you can focus on specific details. You're like, oh, this is so apparent now. It's like looking at your birth certificate as an adoptee. You have to look at things that nobody else looks at, it's like born in whatever, but, like, looking at the numbers, like, why is my birth certificate dated 2 years after I was born? That's a good question. Like, where was I for 6 months? I had to, like,
wait a minute. What do you mean your birth certificate? Which, you mean your amended birth certificate that with your parents and your adoptive parents' names on it?
It was dated. I was born in 1966. It's dated 1968.
And you don't know where you were for the first, or how old were you when you came home when they picked you up?
I was almost 6 months old,
okay.
But I didn't realize that until I sat down and was like, okay, this happened. The date in my birth, my baby book says they brought me home this date. I was born this day, brought home this day. Where was I for 6 months? And then that sent me back to Catholic Charities going, hey, where was I for 6 months? And there I got as luck would have it, I got a lovely caseworker who was pregnant, going out on maternity leave herself. And she basically was like, you were in a private foster home. She's like, I'm going to send you the details because both people are deceased. And she goes, but you have to promise you didn't get this from me. And so, And so in the mail, I got just a note, like
Angels.
Handwritten note that said said who they were, where they lived, and then a picture, the first picture ever I'd seen of myself. I probably was like 3 months old. It was the only ever photo I have of myself.
Yeah. I don't have a picture of myself under a year. I don't think.
It dropped out of that envelope and I was like, oh my God.
That's crazy.
And I look, my sons looked just like me. My grandsons looked just like me.
Wow.
It was, and I could just see in my face this, like, you can just tell in your own eyes. You're like, I just looked confused and like, what's going on? And like, I just looked like, numb.
Oh, I'm getting chills just thinking about that.
It was such a out of body experience to see that, and such a gift that she would give me that. And I turned it over, and the name.
All right, that's the end of part 1. Part 2 will be on our next episode.
Looking forward to it. In the meantime, I am Richard Castle, and you could go to my website, richardcastle.com, to learn about what I'm doing when I'm not on this podcast, or you could follow me on the Twitter or on Instagram at Castle Songs.
I'm Julie Dixon Jackson. You can find me on the Twitter at joolsjackson with 2 O's. Find the podcast on the Twitter at CutOff Jeans Pod. Find the Facebook group. Find me on TikTok for some strange reason. At Jules Jackson, I think, is what I am there. And there's also a CutOff Jeans Instagram page.
And as always, Julie, what do you want to tell everybody?
The truth is in your jeans.